The Valiant was dying. Captain Lisa Bennett gripped the arms of her command chair as another blast rocked the ship. Sparks showered from damaged consoles. The lights flickered. Somewhere deep in the ship, she could hear alarms blaring and damage control teams shouting. "Shield status," she barked. Lieutenant Greg Palmer's voice was tight with stress. "Shields at 15%, Captain. We have fires on decks 3, 7, and 9. Hull breaches on deck 5. Casualty reports are coming in." Bennett looked at the tactical display. The Valiant had managed to destroy one Zynthian battlecruiser and badly damage another, but there were still 4 fully operational enemy ships, and they were circling like sharks that smelled blood. Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison appeared at her side, his uniform torn and his face smudged with smoke. "Captain, we need to withdraw. We cannot take much more of this." Bennett looked at the display showing the planet below. Down there, 50 Marines were fighting to save 200 colonists. Her Marines. Her people. "Jake, if we pull back now, those soldiers down there are on their own. The Zynthians will rain fire on them from orbit. Everyone dies." Morrison grabbed her arm, his eyes desperate. "Lisa, if we stay, everyone dies anyway. The ship cannot survive another full volley. We need to retreat, call for reinforcements, come back with a fleet." Bennett knew he was right. The tactically smart decision was to withdraw. Save the ship. Save the crew. Come back later with overwhelming force. That was what any reasonable commander would do. But she also knew that by the time reinforcements arrived, New Haven would be a graveyard. The colonists would be dead. The Marines would be dead. And Earth would have abandoned her own. "No," Bennett said quietly but firmly. "We hold the line." Before Morrison could respond, Palmer shouted from his station. "Captain?" "I am picking up something on long-range sensors. Multiple contacts coming in fast." Bennett's heart sank. More Zynthians. This was it. The end. Then Palmer looked up and he was smiling. "Ma'am, they are ours. Earth ships. It is the 3rd Fleet." The view screen changed, showing the most beautiful sight Bennett had ever seen. 23 Earth Defense Force warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel in perfect formation. Cruisers, destroyers, and at the center, the massive dreadnought Roosevelt, flagship of Admiral Rodriguez. The comm system crackled to life. "Valiant, this is Admiral Rodriguez. Sorry we are late to the party. Looks like you saved us some action." Bennett felt tears spring to her eyes, but she blinked them back. "Admiral, you are a sight for sore eyes. We could use some help up here." "Already on it, Captain. All ships engage the enemy. Let's show these Zynthians what happens when they mess with Earth." The 3rd Fleet swept into battle like avenging angels. Their weapons lit up space, hammering the surprised Zynthian battlecruisers. The enemy had been focused on the dying Valiant. They had not expected reinforcements. The Zynthians tried to respond, but they were now outnumbered. 2 of their battlecruisers tried to run, accelerating toward the edge of the system. The Roosevelt's heavy railguns spoke, and one of the fleeing ships exploded in a ball of fire. The other made it to the faster-than-light jump point and vanished. The remaining Zynthian ships fought desperately, but it was hopeless. One by one, they were disabled or destroyed. Within 15 minutes, the battle in space was over, but the battle on the ground was still raging. Danny Cooper's ammunition counter showed 20 rounds left. Around him, the other Marines were in similar shape. They had been fighting for almost an hour, holding the line around the shelter entrance. The Zynthians kept coming, wave after wave. Corporal Amy Sullivan's left arm hung useless at her side, burned by a plasma bolt that had gotten through her armor. But she kept firing with her right hand, her face set in grim determination. "Sergeant, we are almost out of ammo," she shouted. Cooper looked at his tactical display. 27 Marines were still combat effective. The rest were dead or too wounded to fight. The Zynthians had lost hundreds, but they had hundreds more. The math was not in humanity's favor. "Fix bayonets," Cooper ordered. The Marines attached their combat knives to the ends of their rifles. If they ran out of bullets, they would fight hand to hand. They had not come this far to quit now. A Zynthian walker rounded the corner, its plasma cannons charging. Cooper knew this was it. They could not stop that thing with their remaining ammunition. Then the sky opened up. Beams of pure energy lanced down from orbit, precise and devastating. They struck the Zynthian positions with pinpoint accuracy. The walker exploded, torn apart by orbital bombardment. Enemy soldiers were vaporized where they stood. Cooper looked up and saw the 3rd Fleet in orbit, their weapons targeting every Zynthian position around the colony. It was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. "All Marines, take cover," he shouted. The orbital bombardment continued for 30 seconds, surgically removing every Zynthian threat around the shelter. When it stopped, the battlefield was silent except for small fires and the groaning of damaged structures. Cooper slowly stood up. Around him, the other Marines emerged from cover. They looked at the destruction, then at each other. Someone started laughing, and soon they were all laughing. The sound of humans who had faced death and survived. "Did we just win?" Kyle Murphy asked, his voice full of disbelief. Cooper nodded slowly. "Yeah, we just won." Amy Sullivan lowered her rifle and sat down heavily on a piece of rubble. "I cannot believe it. We actually pulled it off, but there was no time to celebrate." Cooper ran to the shelter door and pounded on it. "Helen Price." "This is Sergeant Cooper. It is over." "The Zynthians are gone. You can come out now." For a moment, nothing happened. Then he heard the sound of locks being disengaged. The heavy door swung open slowly, and light spilled out from inside. Helen Price stood in the doorway, blinking in the smoky sunlight. She was thin, her clothes dirty, her face lined with stress and fear. Behind her, Cooper could see the colonists. 200 people who had survived 3 weeks in a hole in the ground. Helen looked at Cooper, then at the other Marines, then at the destroyed Zynthian forces around them. Her legs gave out and she fell to her knees. "You came," she whispered. "You actually came for us." Cooper knelt down beside her. He removed his helmet so she could see his face. "Ma'am, I told you. We are Earth's warriors. We protect our own. Always." Helen looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. "We thought we were alone. We thought nobody cared about a small colony so far from home." "You were never alone," Cooper said gently. "Every human in the galaxy is connected. Distance does not matter. When you call, we come. That is a promise." The colonists began to emerge from the shelter, blinking in the light like people waking from a nightmare. They saw the Marines, these warriors who had dropped from the sky to save them. Some cried, some laughed, some just stood there in shock. Young Peter Dixon ran up to Amy Sullivan. "You are hurt," he said, looking at her burned arm. Sullivan smiled despite the pain. "It is just a scratch, kid. I have had worse, thank you," Peter said simply. "Thank you for saving us." Sullivan's tough expression cracked. She reached out with her good hand and ruffled the kid's hair. "That is what we do. We protect people, especially brave people like you who survived down there for 3 weeks." Up in orbit, Admiral Rodriguez's face appeared on the Valiant's view screen. "Captain Bennett, I should have you court-martialed for disobeying orders." Bennett straightened in her chair, ready to accept whatever punishment came. "Yes, sir." Rodriguez's stern expression broke into a smile. "But instead, I am recommending you and your entire crew for the Medal of Valor. What you did here today, it reminded everyone in the fleet why we serve. You did not calculate odds, you did not weigh costs, you just did what was right." Bennett felt the weight of the last hours settle on her shoulders. "Sir, we lost 43 crew members. Good people, I know," Rodriguez said quietly. "And their sacrifice saved 200 lives. They will be remembered as heroes. All of you will." On the surface, medical ships were landing. Doctors and nurses rushed out to treat the wounded, both colonists and Marines. The colony was in ruins, but it could be rebuilt. The people were alive, and that was what mattered. Danny Cooper stood with his remaining Marines watching the medics work. They had lost 23 Marines in the battle, almost half their force. Each loss hurt like a knife to the heart, but they had saved 200 people. 200 lives that would have been lost if they had not come. Kyle Murphy walked up beside Cooper. "Sergeant, do you think it was worth it?" 23 Marines for 200 colonists. Cooper was quiet for a long moment. "Murphy, we do not calculate worth. We do not measure the value of human lives like that. Every single person we saved today matters. Every colonist, every child, every scientist. They all matter, and the Marines we lost, they knew what they were doing. They knew the risks, and they came anyway because that is who we are." Murphy nodded slowly. "Yeah, that is who we are." The sun was setting on New Haven Colony. The fires were being put out. The wounded were being treated. And for the first time in 3 weeks, the colonists could look at the sky without fear. They had thought no one would come. They had thought Earth was too far away, that they were too small to matter. But warriors from Earth had fallen from the sky, and nothing in the galaxy would ever make them feel alone again. The drop pods hit the ground like meteors, each one creating a small crater in the earth around New Haven Colony. Danny Cooper burst from his pod with his rifle already raised. The first thing he saw was a Zynthian soldier standing 50 meters away, its weapon turning toward him. Cooper fired 3 rounds. The magnetically accelerated bullets crossed the distance in a fraction of a second, and tore through the alien's natural armor. The Zynthian fell backward, its weapon clattering to the ground. Out! 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 Cooper shouted to his team. 4 Marines emerged from the pod behind him, spreading out in a practiced formation. Around them, the other pods were opening, releasing Earth's warriors into the combat zone, the air filled with the sound of gunfire and shouting. Cooper took cover behind a damaged wall and assessed the situation. The colony was worse than he expected. Buildings were collapsed or burning. The streets were filled with debris. And everywhere he looked, there were Zynthian soldiers. The aliens stood 7 feet tall, their bodies covered in natural armor that looked like black glass. They moved with an insect-like quality, quick and precise. Their plasma weapons glowed with purple energy, but they had not expected resistance. They had been killing defenseless colonists for 3 weeks. Now they faced Earth's Marines, and the confusion on their faces was clear even through their alien features. All squads, report. Cooper barked into his comm. Alpha Squad operational. We have enemy contact. Corporal Kyle Murphy's voice came back. Bravo Squad on the ground. Engaging hostiles. Sergeant Linda Hayes responded. Charlie Squad ready. We are taking fire from the east. Amy Sullivan called out. Cooper pulled up his tactical display. The helmet showed him the positions of all his Marines marked in blue. Enemy contacts appeared in red, and there were a lot of them. The Zynthians had at least 200 soldiers in the immediate area, with more coming. Squad leaders link up and form a perimeter around the main shelter. That is where the colonists are hiding, Cooper ordered. The Marines began to move, using the ruined buildings for cover as they advanced. The Zynthians tried to stop them, firing plasma bolts that melted through concrete and steel. But the humans moved with purpose, each squad covering the others as they pushed forward. Cooper saw a group of Zynthians setting up a heavy weapon, something that looked like a plasma cannon. If they got that operational, it would tear through the Marines like paper. Murphy, heavy weapon at your 2 o'clock. Take it out, Cooper shouted. Kyle Murphy was already moving. He was a big man, even bigger than Cooper, and he carried his rifle like it weighed nothing. He sprinted across open ground, drawing fire from multiple Zynthian positions. Plasma bolts scorched the air around him, but he did not slow down. Murphy slid into cover behind a burned-out vehicle, aimed, and fired. His shots were precise, each one finding its target. The Zynthians manning the heavy weapon fell, and Murphy was already moving again before their bodies hit the ground. Weapon down, Murphy reported. But the Zynthians were adapting. They began to bring in their walker units, massive 4-legged machines that stood 15 feet tall. Each walker carried twin plasma cannons and thick armor plating. 3 of them rounded a corner, their weapons already charging. We have walkers. I repeat, we have enemy walkers. Linda Hayes shouted. Cooper cursed under his breath. The walkers were a problem. Marine rifles could damage them, but it took sustained fire to bring them down, and while they were shooting at walkers, the Zynthian infantry would cut them apart. Hayes, I need anti-armor, now, Cooper ordered. Private First Class Chris Hayes, the youngest member of Cooper's squad, hefted a rocket launcher onto his shoulder. His hands shook slightly, but his voice was steady when he spoke. Target acquired, Sergeant. Fire when ready, Cooper said. The rocket launched with a whoosh of flame and smoke. It streaked across the battlefield and slammed into the lead walker's leg joint. The explosion was massive, tearing the walker's leg completely off. The machine toppled sideways, crushing 2 Zynthian soldiers beneath it. Good shot, Hayes, Cooper shouted. But the other 2 walkers were still operational, and they had found targets. Plasma cannons opened fire, sweeping across the Marine positions. One bolt struck a building where Bravo Squad had taken cover. The entire structure exploded in a ball of superheated gas and debris. Bravo Squad, report, Cooper shouted into his comm. Static. Bravo Squad, respond. After a terrifying moment, Linda Hayes' voice came through, rough and pained. We are alive, Sergeant, but we lost Martinez and Jackson. The rest of us are wounded. Cooper felt the familiar cold rage settle over him. 2 Marines dead, good people who had volunteered to save strangers on a distant world. The Zynthians would pay for that. Fall back to secondary positions, Cooper ordered. All squads concentrate fire on those walkers. Amy Sullivan's Charlie Squad opened up with everything they had. Rifles cracked, sending streams of bullets into the walkers. The armor held at first, but the sustained fire began to tell. Pieces of plating broke away, exposing the machinery underneath. Sullivan herself had moved to a rooftop, using the height advantage to find weak points. She fired with mechanical precision, each shot aimed at joints and sensors. One walker's main cannon sparked and went dead, its targeting system destroyed. The Xinthians realized they were losing ground. They began to pull back, trying to regroup. But Cooper was not going to give them that chance. "Advance. Push them back," he shouted. The Marines moved forward like a wave of blue and silver, their armor gleaming in the firelight. They moved from cover to cover, supporting each other, never stopping. The Xinthians tried to hold them, but human determination was a force of nature. Cooper saw the entrance to the main shelter ahead. It was a large bunker built into the ground, designed to protect colonists from storms and other natural disasters. The door was sealed, and Xinthian soldiers were trying to cut through it with plasma torches. They were trying to get to the colonists. "Not today," Cooper growled. He sprinted forward, firing as he ran. His bullets cut down 2 Xinthians before they even knew he was there. A third turned and raised its weapon, but Amy Sullivan's shot took it in the head from her perch on the rooftop. Cooper reached the shelter door and slammed his fist against it. "This is Sergeant Cooper, Earth Defense Force. If anyone can hear me, stay back from the door. We are here to get you out." For a moment, there was silence. Then a voice came from inside, muffled but audible. It was a woman's voice, cracking with emotion. "You came," she said, as if she could not believe it. "You actually came." Cooper recognized the voice from the recordings. "Helen Price, the colony administrator." "Yes, ma'am, we came," Cooper said. "Now stay back. We are going to clear the area and get you out of there." But even as he spoke, he saw more Xinthians approaching. They were bringing in reinforcements, and these looked different. Heavier armor, bigger weapons, elite troops. Kyle Murphy appeared beside Cooper, breathing hard. "Sergeant, we cannot hold this position for long. There are too many of them." Cooper looked at his tactical display. The Marines had taken casualties. They were low on ammunition. The Xinthians were bringing in more forces, and up in orbit, the Valiant was still fighting 6 battlecruisers alone. But the colonists were right there behind that door. 200 people who had survived 3 weeks of hell because they refused to give up. People who had sent a message into space saying they did not expect anyone to come, but hoping someone would hear. Cooper had heard. And he had come. And he was not leaving without them. "We hold," Cooper said simply. "No matter what." Murphy nodded and took up position beside the shelter door. Other Marines joined them, forming a defensive line. Amy Sullivan's voice came over the comm. "Sergeant, I count at least 300 Xinthians moving on your position. Maybe more. 300 against less than 50 Marines. Terrible odds. Impossible odds." Cooper smiled inside his helmet. "Good. Finally a fair fight." The Xinthians charged, their weapons firing. The Marines met them with a wall of gunfire that lit up the darkening sky. The battle for New Haven Colony had truly begun. Inside the shelter, Helen Price pressed her ear against the door. She could hear the battle outside, the sounds of weapons fire and explosions. But she could also hear something else. Human voices shouting orders, encouraging each other, refusing to give up. She turned to the 200 colonists huddled in the darkness behind her. Their faces were dirty and scared. They had not seen sunlight in 3 weeks. They had lost friends and family. They had given up hope. "They came for us," Helen said, her voice breaking. "Earth sent warriors to save us. We are not alone anymore." A young colonist named Peter Dixon looked up at her with wide eyes. "Are we going to be okay?" Helen thought about the Marines fighting outside. She thought about the ship in orbit, battling against impossible odds. She thought about all those people who had traveled across the stars because a small colony needed help. "Yes," she said with absolute certainty, "we are going to be okay, because Earth does not abandon her children." Outside, Danny Cooper and his Marines prepared to hold the line against an enemy that outnumbered them 6-1. They had come to save people they had never met. They had dropped from the sky into hell itself, and they were not going anywhere. The Valiant dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Kepler 442b system. The sudden shift from impossible speed to normal space made the ship shudder. On the bridge, Captain Lisa Bennett gripped the arms of her command chair and stared at the tactical display. What she saw made her blood run cold. 6 Xinthian battlecruisers hung in orbit around the planet like vultures circling a corpse. Their ships were massive, blade-shaped vessels that gleamed dark purple in the light of the distant sun. Each one was twice the size of the Valiant. Each one carried enough firepower to destroy a city. Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison stood beside her, his face pale. "Captain, sensors confirm 6 enemy battlecruisers. They have us on scanners. They know we are here." Bennett did not take her eyes off the display. Below those ships, down on the planet's surface, New Haven Colony was burning. She could see the heat signatures even from space. Fires raged through the settlement. The Xinthians had been thorough. "Any signs of life on the surface?" she asked. Lieutenant Greg Palmer worked frantically at his station. "Scanning now, Captain. I am picking up faint heat signatures in the underground areas. The shelters. There are people still alive down there." Bennett felt a surge of relief. They had not come too late. "Not yet, Captain. We are being hailed," Palmer said. "It is the lead Xinthian ship." "Put it on screen," Bennett ordered. The main view screen flickered to life. A Xinthian commander appeared, its face a nightmare of scales and sharp angles. Its eyes were black and emotionless, like a shark's eyes. When it spoke, its voice was like stones grinding together. "Human vessel," the Xinthian said. "You are alone. 1 ship against 6. Turn back now and we will allow you to leave with your life. This world belongs to us. The humans here are already dead or soon will be." Bennett stood up from her chair. She walked closer to the screen, her jaw set. "This world belongs to Earth. Those people down there are under our protection. You have 30 seconds to withdraw your forces and leave this system, or we will remove you ourselves." The Xinthian commander's mouth opened in what might have been a laugh. Its teeth were like needles. "You are either very brave or very foolish, human. 6 ships against 1. Your mathematics must be poor." Bennett smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "We prefer to think of ourselves as brave, and our mathematics are just fine. We know exactly what we are facing." She leaned closer to the screen. "The question is, do you know what you are facing?" She cut the transmission before the Xinthian could respond. Morrison stared at her. "Captain, what is the plan?" Bennett turned to face her crew. Every officer on the bridge was looking at her, waiting for orders. They knew the odds. They knew this was probably a suicide mission, but not one of them looked ready to run. "Jake, launch all fighters," she said calmly. "Target the nearest battlecruiser with everything we have. Palmer, I want full power to forward shields, and get me a firing solution on their command ship." "Aye, Captain," Morrison said, already moving to carry out her orders. Bennett sat back down in her command chair. "And Jake? Tell Sergeant Cooper to get his Marines ready. We are going to punch a hole through their fleet and get our people to the surface." In the deployment bay, Danny Cooper was briefing his squad. The Marines stood in formation, 50 men and women in combat armor. Their weapons were checked and loaded. Their faces were grim but determined. Cooper paced in front of them like a caged wolf. "Listen up. The Valiant is going to engage the enemy fleet. While Captain Bennett keeps them busy, we are going to drop straight through the combat zone and land on New Haven. Our mission is simple: secure the colonists and eliminate any Xinthian ground forces." Corporal Amy Sullivan raised her hand. "Sergeant, what about the fleet battle? What if the Valiant cannot hold them off?" Cooper stopped pacing. He looked at Sullivan, then at the rest of his Marines. "Then we complete our mission anyway. We save those colonists and we hold the line until reinforcements arrive or until we cannot hold anymore. That is what Marines do." Private First Class Chris Hayes spoke up, his voice shaking slightly. "Sergeant, how do we fight 1,000 enemies with 50 soldiers?" Cooper walked over to Hayes and put a hand on the young Marine's shoulder. "Hayes, you know what the biggest advantage we have is?" Hayes shook his head. "We are human. We do not calculate odds. We do not quit when things look bad, and we sure as hell do not leave our people behind. The Xinthians fight for conquest. We fight for each other. That makes all the difference." The ship shook violently as the first enemy weapons fire struck the shields. Red alert klaxons began to wail throughout the Valiant. "Load up," Cooper shouted. "Get into your pods. We drop in 5 minutes." The Marines rushed to the drop pods lined up along the bay walls. Each pod was a metal coffin designed to carry 5 soldiers through space, through atmosphere, and straight into a combat zone. They were cramped, uncomfortable, and terrifying. But they worked. Cooper climbed into his pod with 4 other Marines. Amy Sullivan was across from him, her face set with determination. Next to her was Corporal Kyle Murphy, a veteran who had fought on Mars during the rebellion. The other 2 were younger Marines barely out of training. The pod doors sealed shut with a hiss. Cooper activated his helmet display and saw the tactical feed from the bridge. The Valiant was moving now, accelerating toward the Xinthian fleet at full speed. On the bridge, Captain Bennett watched the distance close. "Morrison, status on weapons?" "All railguns charged and ready, Captain." "Missile tubes loaded. Fighters are launching now." 12 small fighter craft shot out from the Valiant's hangar bays. They were fast and deadly, piloted by some of the best flyers in the fleet. They spread out in attack formation, their weapons already firing. The Zynthian battlecruisers responded, their own fighters launching to intercept. Plasma bolts lit up the space between the fleets. The battle had begun. "Fire!" Bennett ordered. The Valiant's main railguns opened up, sending magnetically accelerated slugs screaming toward the nearest Zynthian ship. The rounds moved at a significant fraction of light speed, crossing the distance in seconds. They slammed into the enemy battlecruiser's shields, causing them to flare brilliant purple. The Zynthians fired back. Energy beams lanced out from their ships, striking the Valiant's forward shields. The ship rocked under the impact, shields holding at 70%, Palmer reported. Bennett gritted her teeth. "Keep firing. Target their shield generators. I want a hole in their defenses." The Valiant and the Zynthian fleet exchanged fire, massive weapons designed to destroy planets now focused on each other. The space between them became a storm of energy and metal. In his drop pod, Cooper felt each impact shake the ship. He knew what Captain Bennett was doing. She was drawing all their attention, making herself the biggest threat, giving the drop pods a chance to get through. 30 seconds to launch, a computerized voice announced in the pod. Cooper activated his squad comm. "All squads sound off." "Alpha Squad ready," Corporal Kyle Murphy responded. "Bravo Squad ready," Sergeant Linda Hayes called out. "Charlie Squad ready," Amy Sullivan confirmed. 10 squads, 50 Marines, all ready to drop into hell. "Remember your training," Cooper said. "Hit the ground, secure the landing zone, move to the shelters. We find the colonists, we protect them, and we show these Zynthians what happens when they mess with Earth." The Valiant shuddered as another volley struck her shields. Bennett had maneuvered the ship between the planet and the Zynthian fleet, using her own vessel as a shield for the drop pods. "Launch pods," Morrison shouted. The bottom of the Valiant opened up like a flower, and 50 drop pods shot out into space. They accelerated immediately, their engines burning bright as they raced toward the planet below. The Zynthians saw them and tried to respond, but Captain Bennett anticipated this. She rolled the Valiant directly into their line of fire, taking hits meant for the pods. Her shields flared and weakened, but the pods got through. Cooper watched through his pod's viewport as they entered the planet's atmosphere. Fire surrounded the pod as friction heated the hull to incredible temperatures. The pod shook violently and he could hear the metal groaning under the stress. "Brace for impact," he shouted to his team. Through the flames, Cooper could see New Haven below. The colony was smaller than he expected, just a cluster of buildings surrounded by agricultural fields. But those fields were burning now and the buildings were damaged. Zynthian forces moved through the streets like insects. Not for long. The drop pods hit the atmosphere's lower levels and their retro rockets fired, slowing their descent. They were still falling fast, too fast for comfort, but within survivability range. Cooper could see the ground rushing up to meet them. He saw Zynthian soldiers looking up, pointing at the falling pods. They had no idea what was about to hit them. The pod slammed into the ground with bone-jarring force. The impact cratered the earth and sent shockwaves rippling outward. Before the dust even settled, the pod's explosive bolts fired, blowing the doors off. Cooper was the first one out, his rifle already up and firing. The other Marines poured out behind him, spreading into combat formation. All around them, other pods were landing, 50 metal coffins falling from the sky like the judgment of an angry god. The Zynthians turned to face this new threat. Confused and disorganized, they thought no one would come. The silence was the worst part. 3 weeks had passed since New Haven Colony sent their last message into the darkness of space. The small settlement on Kepler 442b had been screaming for help, their voices growing weaker with each transmission. Now there was nothing but static. Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison stood in the communications room of the Earth Defense Force ship Valiant. His hands gripped the edge of the console as he listened to the recordings again. He had heard them 100 times, but each time felt like the first. Each time, the fear in their voices cut deeper. The voice belonged to Helen Price, the colony administrator. She was not a soldier. She was a farmer, a scientist, someone who grew food on distant worlds. Her voice shook as she spoke into the microphone, knowing that help might never come. "This is New Haven Colony. We are under attack. The Zynthians came 3 days ago. They destroyed our communications tower first, then our power station. We have 200 people here, mostly families, scientists, teachers. We have no weapons, no defenses. They are killing us." Morrison closed his eyes. He could hear explosions in the background of the recording. Screaming. The sound of buildings collapsing. Helen's voice continued, breaking with emotion. "We sent our children into the underground shelters. We are trying to hold them off, but we cannot last much longer. To anyone who hears this message, we do not expect you to come. We are too far away. Too small. Just a little farming colony that nobody cares about. But please, if you hear this, tell our families back on Earth that we loved them. Tell them we tried to survive. Tell them we... The transmission ended with a burst of static and the sound of plasma fire. Then nothing. Morrison opened his eyes and looked at the date stamp on the recording. 21 days ago. If anyone was still alive down there, they had been surviving for 3 weeks against an enemy that showed no mercy. Captain Lisa Bennett entered the communications room. She was a tall woman with sharp eyes and gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. She had commanded the Valiant for 6 years and had seen more combat than most officers twice her age. But even she looked tired now. Still listening to it? She asked quietly. Morrison nodded. Can't stop thinking about them, Captain. Those people down there, they thought nobody would come. Bennett walked to the window and looked out at the stars. The Admiralty has sent new orders. They want us to hold our position. They say it is too dangerous to go to New Haven. Intelligence reports say there are 6 Xinthian battlecruisers in that system. We are just one ship. Morrison felt anger rise in his chest. So we just leave them? Abandon our own people? That's what Command wants, Bennett said. She turned to look at him and Morrison saw something in her eyes. A fire that he recognized. But I didn't ask what they want. I asked what is right. Morrison straightened. Captain? Bennett walked to the communications console and pulled up a star map. New Haven was marked in red, 18 hours away at maximum speed. When I joined the Defense Force, I took an oath. I swore to protect Earth and all her people, wherever they might be. I didn't swear to protect only the ones that were easy to reach. I didn't swear to abandon colonies because the odds were bad. The Admiralty will court-martial you if you disobey orders, Morrison said. Let them, Bennett replied. I would rather face a court-martial than look at myself in the mirror knowing I left 200 people to die because I was afraid. She pressed a button on the console. All hands, this is the captain. Battle stations. Set course for Kepler 442b, maximum burn. We are going to New Haven. Deep in the belly of the Valiant, Sergeant Danny Cooper heard the announcement. He was in the Marine Bay, cleaning his rifle for the 3rd time that day. Around him, 49 other Marines looked up from their equipment. Cooper was a big man with a square jaw and hands that looked like they could bend steel. He had been a Marine for 15 years and had fought in a dozen battles across human space. He knew what the captain's order meant. They were going into a fight they might not win. You heard the captain, Cooper said, standing up. Gear up, this is not a drill. Corporal Amy Sullivan was already strapping on her combat armor. She was smaller than most of the Marines, but Cooper knew she could outfight men twice her size. She had proven that on Europa Station 3 years ago, when Xinthian raiders tried to take the colony. Sullivan had held a choke point alone for 20 minutes, giving civilians time to evacuate. Sergeant, what do we know about the situation on New Haven? She asked. Cooper pulled up a tactical display on his wrist computer. Not much. Last confirmed report said Xinthian ground forces occupied the colony center. They have walker units, heavy armor, and plasma weapons. The colonists have been hiding in underground shelters for 3 weeks. Private First Class Chris Hayes joined them. He was young, maybe 22, with nervous energy that made him bounce on his feet. This would be his first real combat drop. Sergeant, how many Xinthians are we talking about? Intelligence estimates between 500 and 1,000 ground troops, Cooper said. He saw the fear flash across Hayes' face. We are 50 Marines against maybe 1,000 enemies. Those are bad odds, so what do we do? Hayes asked. Cooper smiled, but there was no humor in it. We do what Marines do, Hayes. We even the odds. The bay erupted in activity as Marines checked weapons, loaded ammunition, and helped each other into armor. The combat suits were marvels of engineering, powered exoskeletons that made a human soldier stronger and faster. But they were still just metal and electronics. What mattered was the person inside. Lieutenant Greg Palmer's voice came over the intercom. All personnel be advised. We have 18 hours until we reach New Haven. Captain Bennett requests all squad leaders report to the briefing room in 1 hour. Cooper looked at his Marines. He saw determination in their faces, but also fear. They were human. They knew what they were walking into. A colony under siege, outnumbered enemies, and a battle that command had already written off as unwinnable. But they also knew something else. They knew that somewhere on a distant planet, people were hiding in the dark, thinking that nobody cared enough to save them, thinking that they were alone. Listen up, Cooper said, his voice cutting through the noise. In 18 hours we are going to drop into hell. The Xinthians think they have won. They think they can attack our people and we will not care. They think we calculate odds like they do. They think we weigh costs and benefits. He paused, looking each Marine in the eye. But they are wrong. We do not abandon our people. We do not calculate whether they are worth saving. When humans call for help, we answer. Every single time. That is not strategy. That is who we are. Amy Sullivan slammed a magazine into her rifle. Damn right, Sergeant. Other Marines echoed her sentiment. Cooper saw the fear in their eyes transform into something else. Something stronger. Purpose. Up on the bridge, Captain Bennett watched the stars streak past as the Valiant accelerated to maximum speed. Morrison stood beside her, his face troubled. Captain, even if we survive the space battle, even if we get our Marines to the surface, we are still gambling everything on a single mission, he said. Bennett nodded. Yes, we are. But Jake, those people down there have been alone for 3 weeks. They sent out a message saying they did not expect anyone to come. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine being so far from home that you think nobody will save you? Morrison was quiet for a moment. No, ma'am. I cannot, neither can I, Bennett said. And I never want any human to feel that way again. So we go to New Haven, we fight, and we show the galaxy that Earth does not abandon her children. The Valiant raced through space, a single ship carrying 50 Marines toward impossible odds. Behind them, Earth was months away. Ahead, a small colony waited in darkness, not knowing that help was coming. Helen Price would have given up hope by now. The colonists hiding in their shelters would have accepted their fate. They thought nobody would come. But warriors from Earth were falling through the stars toward them, and nothing in the galaxy would stop them from reaching New Haven. 3 days had passed since the battle. New Haven Colony was still a mess of damaged buildings and scorched earth, but it was alive. People moved through the streets, beginning the slow work of rebuilding. Medical tents dotted the landscape, treating the wounded. And everywhere, Earth Defense Force personnel worked alongside colonists to restore order. Helen Price stood in what used to be the colony's main square. The administration building behind her was half collapsed, but she had set up a temporary command post in a tent. She was looking at reports when Danny Cooper approached. Ma'am, I wanted to check in before we ship out, Cooper said. Helen looked up at him. The sergeant looked tired, his face lined with exhaustion and grief. She knew he had spent the last 3 days helping with recovery efforts while also dealing with the loss of half his squad. You are leaving? She asked. Cooper nodded. Admiral Rodriguez wants us back on the Valiant. They have repairs to oversee and we have reports to file. Plus, the 3rd Fleet is establishing a permanent garrison here. You will have protection now. Helen stood and walked to him. Sergeant Cooper, I do not know how to thank you. You came when we had given up hope. You risked everything to save us. Cooper shook his head. No thanks necessary, ma'am. We just did our duty. Your duty was to obey orders, Helen said quietly. Captain Bennett told me she was ordered not to come. But she came anyway. You all came anyway. Some things are more important than orders, Cooper said. Those 200 people in the shelter? They are more important than orders, regulations, or tactical sense. They are human beings who needed help. That is all that mattered. Helen reached out and took his hand. Before this happened, I thought Earth was just a distant place, the homeworld that we left behind to build new lives out here. But now I understand, Earth is not a place. It is an idea. It is the promise that we never abandon our own, that we will cross any distance, face any enemy to protect each other. Cooper smiled, and for the first time in days it reached his eyes. You understand perfectly, ma'am. Young Peter Dixon ran up to them out of breath. Sergeant Cooper, is it true? Are you really leaving? Cooper knelt down to the boy's level. Yeah, kid. We have to go. But you will be safe now. There are soldiers here who will protect you. Peter's face fell. But I wanted to thank you properly. You and Corporal Sullivan and all the others. You saved my mom. You saved all of us. Cooper put a hand on the boy's shoulder. You know what would be the best thank you? You grow up strong. You help rebuild this colony. And someday, when someone else needs help, you remember what happened here. You remember that Earth does not abandon her children. Can you do that for me? Peter nodded seriously. I promise, Sergeant. I will never forget. At the temporary landing pad, Amy Sullivan was saying her own goodbyes. Her left arm was in a sling, the plasma burn still healing. A colonist doctor named Nathan Clark was checking her bandages one last time. You should really stay for another week, Clark said. This burn is serious. It needs more treatment. Sullivan shook her head. Doc, I appreciate it, but I need to get back to my ship. My squad needs me. Clark stepped back and looked at her. You Marines are all crazy, you know that? You came here knowing you might die. You fought against impossible odds, and now you are leaving like it was nothing special. It was not about being special, Sullivan said. It was about doing what needed to be done. She paused. Doc, can I ask you something? When you were down in that shelter for 3 weeks, did you really think no one would come? Clark was quiet for a moment. Honestly? Yes, we thought we were too far away, too unimportant. Just another small colony that would be forgotten. We sent that message not because we expected help, but because we wanted someone to know we existed, to know we tried. And now? Sullivan asked. Now I know that distance means nothing to Earth, Clark said. Now I know that every human matters, no matter where they are. You taught us that, Sullivan smiled. Good. Do not forget it. On the bridge of the Valiant, Captain Lisa Bennett was meeting with Admiral Rodriguez via video link. The Admiral's face filled the screen, his expression thoughtful. Captain, your ship took significant damage, Rodriguez said. The Roosevelt will tow you back to the nearest shipyard for repairs. It will take months to get the Valiant operational again. Bennett nodded. Understood, sir. And the court-martial? Rodriguez laughed. There will be no court-martial, Lisa. What you did here has already become legend throughout the fleet. Every ship in human space is talking about the Valiant, the ship that defied orders to save a colony. You have given us all something to aspire to. Sir, we lost 43 crew members, Bennett said, her voice tight. Rodriguez's expression turned serious. I know, and each one of them is a hero. They will be honored, remembered, and their families will be told that they died saving 200 innocent people. There is no greater sacrifice. Bennett looked out the viewport at New Haven below. Sir, what happens now? The Zynthians will not forget this. They will come back. Let them try, Rodriguez said firmly. I am establishing a permanent fleet presence in this sector. 3 ships will stay here at all times, and I am sending word to every colony in human space. If you are threatened, if you are attacked, Earth will respond. We do not calculate whether you are worth saving. We do not measure the cost. We just come, always. Bennett felt pride swell in her chest. That is a good policy, sir. It is the only policy, Rodriguez said. It is what makes us human. Down in the Marine Bay, Danny Cooper gathered the survivors of his squad. 27 Marines stood before him, tired and wounded but alive. They had fought in hell and come out the other side. Listen up, Cooper said. What we did here, it is going to change things. Every species in the galaxy is going to hear about New Haven. They are going to hear that 50 humans dropped onto a planet to fight 1,000 enemies. They are going to hear that one ship fought 6 battle cruisers to protect those soldiers, and they are going to learn something important. He paused, looking each Marine in the eye. They are going to learn that humanity does not abandon its own. They are going to learn that we do not calculate odds or weigh costs when our people need help. They are going to learn that we are not like them. We are something different. Something that will cross any distance, face any enemy, and pay any price to protect each other. Kyle Murphy raised his hand. Sergeant, what about the Marines we lost? What about Martinez and Jackson and the others? Cooper's expression softened. We honor them by continuing their mission. They came here to save people and they succeeded. Every colonist alive down there is alive because of their sacrifice. That is their legacy. That is what we will remember. Amy Sullivan stepped forward. Sergeant, I have been thinking. What we did here, it was not tactical genius. It was not superior firepower. We were outnumbered and outgunned. So how did we win? Cooper smiled. We won because we are human, Sullivan. The Zynthians fight for territory, for resources, for power. We fight for each other. That makes all the difference. They calculate, we care. And in the end, caring is stronger than any calculation. The Marines stood a little straighter. They understood now. They had not just won a battle. They had proven something fundamental about humanity. They had shown the galaxy what Earth's warriors were made of. As the Valiant prepared to depart, Helen Price gathered all the colonists in the square. 200 people, dirty and tired but alive, looked up at the ships in orbit. I want to say something, Helen began. 3 weeks ago we were attacked. We sent out a distress call, not because we expected help, but because we wanted someone to know we existed. We thought we were alone. We thought Earth had forgotten about us. She paused, her voice breaking with emotion. But we were wrong. Earth did not forget. When we called, they answered. One ship came, then 50 Marines dropped from the sky, and then an entire fleet arrived. They fought for us. They bled for us. Some of them died for us. Peter Dixon stepped forward. Why did they come? We are just a small colony. We are not important. Helen knelt down to his level. But we are important, Peter. That is what they taught us. Every human life is important. Every colony, no matter how small or how far from Earth, matters. Because we are all connected. We are all part of the same family. She stood and looked up at the ships again. The Xinthians thought they could attack us without consequences. They thought Earth would not care about a distant farming colony. But they learned something today. They learned that there is no such thing as an unimportant human. They learned that when you threaten one of us, you threaten all of us. A colonist raised her hand. What do we do now? Helen smiled. We rebuild. We make New Haven stronger than before, and we remember what happened here. We remember that we are never alone. That somewhere out there, Earth's warriors stand ready to protect us. All we have to do is call and they will come. Every single time. The Valiant's engines fired and the ship began to move away from the planet. On the bridge, Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison stood beside Captain Bennett. Captain, we did something special here, he said quietly. Bennett nodded. We did what was right, Jake, that is all. The whole galaxy is going to know about this. Every species will hear the story of New Haven. Bennett looked at the planet growing smaller in the viewport. Good. Let them hear.